Hello. So welcome to the June. Why did I say hello like that? I don't know. Well, welcome to the June 2022 Regents review. So for the first one, definitely calculator, right? You could store a number in for X, plug this in, see which one matches. This is also on the non-negotiables. So you have X and you have to say which one is equivalent to. So this top number is our exponent. The bottom number is our root. Roots go on the bottom. So it's the fourth root of the 3 is the exponent. So the 3 can either go here on the inside of the radical or here on the outside of the radical. According to the answer choices, they put the 3 on the inside of the radical. So that looks exactly like this, right? So it's fourth root. This says third root, so they switch that around. That's wrong. This has no radicals whatsoever, so these are out as well. All right, question number 2, not a calculator question, just talks a little bit about gathering an appropriate sample. So for this question, we're looking for which plan is the best process for gathering an appropriate sample, and they want to see how students feel about changing the school mascot's name. So you want to make sure that it is representative of everyone that this affects. So for number 1, it says sample of senior homerooms, specifically seniors, so that is going to be out. Survey every 10th student entering art classes in the school. That leaves out other people, so people who don't take art. Okay, so that is not a fair sample. Survey every 4th student entering the cafeteria during each lunch period. So each lunch period, that could work, right? Because if they just had one lunch period, not everyone has lunch that period. So this could possibly be it. Survey all members of the school's varsity sports team. So again, not everyone is part of the varsity sports team. I think you get the point. You need to make it random as possible. So the more random it is, the less bias there is. You do need to know that. All right. For number 3, there are like really 3 different ways to do this. So you could definitely long divide. You could do synthetic division, and you could do something called the remainder theorem. Remainder theorem is by far the easiest, and the way that we can use remainder theorem is because all these remainders are different. Here there's a remainder of 0, and here there's a remainder of 20. So all these remainders are different. So let me just show you how to use remainder theorem real quick. Remainder theorem says you set this equal to 0. So x plus 3, set this equal to 0. Subtract 3 from both sides, and you get x equals -3. So what you do in your calculator is you take -3 and you store it whenever my calculator feels like going on. So -3, store it in for x, hit enter, and then we're going to plug in the whole top. So we have 2x to the third, then we have plus 7x, and again, you should be doing this with me. This is not just me doing this, right? You should be doing this and make sure that you're comfortable, and hit enter. And look, what's the remainder? -7, right? So the only one that has a remainder of -7 is option number 1. So number 1 is the answer, okay? You could also do synthetic division. Synthetic, I did not teach you synthetic division, but basically what you do with synthetic is you take the coefficients right here, 2, 7, -3, -25. So I'm going to teach this to you really quick. 2, 7, -3, and -25. And then what you do is, again, right over here, we flip the sign here, so x equals -3. So what you do is you say, okay, 3 times -3 times 2 is -6. So you put that right there, and then you add these together. So 7 minus 6 is 1, and then you do -3. This 2 you have to bring down, and then you do -3 times 1, and that gives you -3. Add these together, so that gives you -6. -3 times -6 gives you positive 18, and then -25 plus 18 is -7. So -7 is our remainder, and what is our answer going to be? It's going to be 2. And then since this is x to the third, you subtract 1, so that's going to be 2x squared plus 1x, you just basically count down, -6. and the remainder is going to be -7 over whatever you were dividing by, which is x plus 3, so that goes on the bottom. If that part right there just confused you, again, this is called synthetic division. So you could also solve this problem like that. And there's a whole bunch of YouTube videos going over synthetic division. I did show it to you doing long division and remainder theorem. So you could take this and long divide 2x to the third plus 7x squared minus 3x minus 25 and divide this by x plus 3. And so you could do it that way as well and still get the same answer. Try this on your own and see if you get option number 1. If not, call me over and I will explain it to you. All right. Question number 4. Group of 20 people, 20 have brown hair, so on and so forth. So as soon as you see something like both brown and so both of something, I automatically kind of think of a Venn diagram. So what are our two categories? We have brown hair and we have blue eyes. Blue eyes. And this is how many have both. So it says in a group of 40 people altogether, 20 have brown hair, so there's 20 altogether here. 22 have blue eyes, so there's going to be 22 here. 22 here. And then 15 have both, so there's 15 going to be here. So to figure out how many people only have brown hair, you do 20 minus 15, which gives us 5, so we could put a 5 here. To figure out how many people only have blue eyes, 22 minus 15 gives us 7. So we would have 7 only having blue eyes. How many people have neither brown hair nor blue eyes? So there's a whole set here. This is people who don't have either. So it's 40 altogether, right? So what you do is 40 minus 5 minus the 15 minus the 7. So we take our handy calculator and do that. So 40 minus 5 minus 15 minus 7. And that gives us 13. So there are 13 people who are in this boat of having none of those. So how many have neither brown hair nor blue eyes? 13. All right, consider the function defined below. Which equation could be used to represent the graph shown below? So what is happening here, right? There is a flip over this line, which is the x-axis. So if you had a function f of x, which is representing this on top, then this one on the bottom would be negative f of x, right? The negative sign in the front means that it gets reflected over the x-axis. I kind of remember it as this is out, and what is out of my life? My x's are out of my life. So it gets flipped over the x-axis. So let's see. So the original is called h of x. So instead of f, let's call this h. So this one right here is going to be a negative h of x, because that's what they're calling it. They're not calling it f, and that represents number 3. Let me just kind of go over this real quick. H of x minus 2 would mean that you would take your original function, which looks something like that, and you would subtract 2 from it, right? Which means that it would come down here. So that's what graph 1 would look like. Graph 2 would say this gets moved over. This is left or right, and it's the opposite of what you think. So you'd actually think it's moved to the left 2, but this is moved to the right 2. So if this is your original function, something like this, then you would move this to the, again, it's negative 2, so you're moving it to the right 2, so it looks something like that. So that's option number 2. We already talked about number 3, right? It gets reflected over the x-axis. And this one right here would get reflected over the y-axis. Look where the negative sign is. It's next to, it's after the h or after the function, so that gets reflected over the y-axis, which is not what's happening. So choice 3. All right, question number 6, polynomial, da-da-da. Okay, so this kind of, we talked a little bit about this with the remainder theorem. So if p of 3 equals 0, it can be concluded that. So remember, you're taking the opposite of what's here. So the opposite of 3 is negative 3, and that's going to be the factor. So if this right here, if P of 3 equals 0, that means that this is going to be a factor of P of X. And then it says when P of X is divided by 3. No, that's not true. Remember, for the remainder theorem, right, to go backwards, you would set this equal to 0, add 3 to both sides, and you get x is equal to 3. And so if you take this and plug it back into the original, which is called P of X, if the remainder is 0, which is what they're telling you here, that there's a remainder of 0, then it is a factor. Okay, for this one right here, question number 7, you could do y1, y2, and see where they meet, and then see which one matches with that. Or you could solve this algebraically. So this is low key in the non-negotiables. So we'll go ahead and just do this real quick. You want to get the weird thing by itself. This right here is the weird thing. So to get rid of the 5, we want to divide everything by 5. And that cancels out. So you get e to the x plus 2 equals 7 over 5. How do you get rid of an e? Look on the calculator and you'll see an ln. So whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. As soon as the e and the ln are next to each other, they cancel out. And so you're left with x plus 2 is equal to ln of 7 over 5. To get the x by itself, subtract 2, subtract 2. And so you get x equals ln of 7 over 5 minus 2, which is the same thing as choice 1, right? They just took the negative 2 and they put it out in front. They moved it over. That's completely fine. You could solve this next one, question number 8, with polysimult 2. So I don't have that on this calculator, but just in case, it is apps. And here, when you hit apps, don't remember which number it is, maybe 8 is polysimult 2. So you would hit that. This is a 3, 3 function. And then you hit next, which is graph. And then you plug in, right, the coefficient here is 1, 2, negative 1, 1, so on and so forth. You'd plug that in and see that 3, negative 1, and 0 are going to be your solutions. So the first one is x, second one is y, third one is z. Okay. And again, if you get stuck with that, please call me over so I can explain that to you. For this next one right here, all it is making sure that you understand what each of it is, the variables are. So P is the amount borrowed. So he's borrowing 240,000. So P is equal to 240,000. The R is the rate. So they're telling us that the rate is 4.5%, which as a decimal, 2 places to the left, is 0.045. So that's our rate. And then our time, or well, our n, it says our n is, let's see, 15-year mortgage, okay? And it is going to be, so this is an annual rate, and we're looking for a monthly payment, okay? So what you have to do for our n is going to equal 15, which is the number of years, times how many times is it going to get paid out? It's going to get paid out monthly, which means that there are 12 months in a year. So n is equal to 15 times 12, okay? So then you take this massive thing, and then you plug this into the calculator. All right, so I want to make sure that you know how to do this on the calculator, so let me just go ahead and do this with you. So the first thing we want to do is put this big old the big old division fraction. So alpha y equals option number 1, and we're going to just plug stuff in, right? So our P is 240,000, so 240,000. Make sure you type in those 3 zeros. I said 3 zeros. And it's supposed to be 4 zeros, right? Because 240,000, so that's supposed to be 4 zeros. So let's make sure I put that down. Let me make this calculator a little bit bigger. 1, 2. Let me make sure I did this right. That's 24,000, and I want to put 240,000. Good. Then I have parentheses, and then I want to put another small fraction right here. So alpha y equals option number 1. And so our R is 0.045, and that's dividing by 12. And it's monthly payment. close the parentheses, open parentheses again, and we have 1 plus, and then we put our alpha y equals again, option number 1. I think you kind of get the point, but I'm gonna, like I said, do this with you just to make sure that you are good. And then there's a 12 on the bottom. Then go to the right, close those parentheses, and raise this to the, and so remember n is 15 times 12, which is equal to 180. If you didn't know that you could put 15 times 12 there, but I just want to be safe. So 180, and then on the bottom, parentheses, 1 plus alpha y equals, and our rate is 0.045. Go to the bottom, put a 12, close those parentheses, raise it to the 180 power, and then I put -1, hit enter, and it gives you 180, 1,835. And yep, that is choice number 3. Good. Next one, question number 10. For all where is or what is f of x minus g of x? Okay, so I'm going to take f of x, which is this right here. So x minus 3 squared, and subtract from it g of x, which is x plus 3 squared. Okay. So now we have to go ahead and distribute this out, or double distribute, FOIL. So we have x squared, right? Do box method here. So you should be doing this x minus 3, and x minus 3. There should be a 3 here. Okay. So you get x squared, this is minus 3x, this is minus 3x, and this is plus 9. So these add up to be x squared minus 6x plus 9 minus, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. So this is going to be x squared plus 6x plus 9, and we are subtracting. When we subtract, the rule is keep, change, change. So I'm going to keep that first fraction, minus 6x plus 9, and from it I'm going to, this is going to be opposite, this is going to change, this is going to change, and this is going to change. So x squared minus x squared, they cancel each other out. This is going to be negative 6x minus 6x again, so that's going to be negative 12x. So it looks like this is going to be our answer right now, and let's just make sure. This is negative 9, so 9 minus 9 cancels out as well. So this is negative 12x as my final answer, which is choice 3. Yeah. Question number 11. So it tells us that f of t represents a mass, and this happens every, okay, remaining after t years. Okay, so what I did to get my answer for this question is I want to see statement by statement. So it says which statement must be true. Or statements must be true. So I'm checking the first one. So the mass of carbon-14 is decreasing by half each year. So the best way to do that is to go ahead and plug this into my y equals, which I did. And so if this statement is true, the first one, that means that if I look at t1, t equals 1, and t equals 2, if I look on my table and at 1 and 2, the value of one of them should be half as much as the other, the next one. And that's not what's happening, right? Like if you look, 50.014 is not half of 50. So I know that this first part, or this first statement, is not true. To check the second one, it says the mass of the original sample is 50 grams. What that means is if I take this t, right here, and I put the number 0 right there, right? Or if I go to my calculator and I look what's across from 0, you'll see 50. That means that the original sample is 50 grams, which is true. So 2 is the only one that's true. Right? So that's how you do number 11. All right, question number 12. Consider this graph over the interval 2, 4. which statement regarding the average rate of change, as soon as you see that, you should think slope, and as soon as you hear slope, you should think y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All of these, a lot of the things that we just did right now is on the non-negotiable. Like, so for example, if you plug this right into the calculator, so this is a non-negotiable. I just realized that I put in 5 and not 0.5. Let me see if that makes a difference. And when I went to my table after correcting it, right, it's 0.5, and I go to my table, right, the second one is still not half of the first, so still does not work out, but I think you get the point. All right, so for this one, it says on the interval from 2 to 4, this is very critical. So we're looking at this number and we're looking at this number, and again, this is on the non-negotiables. So what you do is you do, if I call this x2, I call this x1, y1, y2. So I'm going to do 3 minus -5 over 4 minus 2, and if I take that, plug that into the calculator, I'm going to get 8 divided by 2, which is equal to 4. So 4 is the slope of between these 2 points. And if I do the same thing here, I go across from x is 2, so 2, and if x is 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this point right here would be 2 comma 6, and then across from 4, it would be 4 comma 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this point right here would be 4 comma 10. And if I do my 10 minus 6 whole over 4 minus 2, 10 minus 6 is 4, divided by 2 is going to be 2. So what is the answer to this question, right? It's asking you, G has a greater average rate of change. So just want to make sure, nope, G has a smaller average rate of change. So the first one's not true. The average rates of change are equal. That's not true as well, right? One of them is 2, the other one is 4. The average rate of change for G is twice the average rate of change for T. So G, which is this one, right? 2 is not twice as big as 4. So I know that that's not true as well. The average rate of change of G is half the average rate of change for T. So 2 is half of 4. What am I writing? Half of 4. So that is true. All right. The next one, 13, parabola. So I taught this to you to draw with a sketch. On the Regents, you will have graph paper, so you don't need to worry about like getting this like off. But you go to the directrix, which is y equals 3. So this point right here is your directrix, and the vertex is 2 comma 1. So 1, 2 comma 1. So that's our vertex. So they told us that that's our vertex. Huh, interesting. So this is our vertex, which means that the parabola is going to go down right here, but they don't care about the equation of the parabola. They want us to know what is the focus. So remember that the focus is going to be the same distance away, right? So this is 3. This one right here is 1. So that means that P is equal to 2. So the focus is going to be 2 points down from here. So this is at 1. This is 0. So one more down is going to be -1. So the focus is going to be at 2 comma -1, which is answer choice number 1. And again, if that was confusing, definitely do this on a graph. But remember that they gave us the vertex, and the focus is the same distance away. So if this distance is 2, then this distance is going to be 2 as well. This might, again, be easier to see on graph paper. So do this on graph paper. All right. 14, as soon as they say normally distributed, you should know that in your calculator, you're going to use second bars, and you're going to do normal CDF. But let me just make sure. So yeah, right, they give you the mean, they give you a standard deviation of 2.9, and they want us to find between 64 and 68. So I was correct. Normal CDF is option number 2. What is it doing? So let me just clear this. So second bars, normal CDF is choice 2. So our lower that they gave it to us, right? the lower is 64. So 64, the upper is 68. This U thing is our mean, so that's 65.5, and our standard deviation is 2.9. 2.9. And then you just hit enter, 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 and it gives us 0.503, and I bet it says how many, right? The number of students that are. So how many students are there altogether? 3,300. So we have to take this number multiplied by 3,300, hit enter, and we get 1660 or so. So that is choice number 1. Okay. All right, next one. Which statement below about the graph is true? So we want to graph it. So here, there's no base, right? So I could just use this log button right here. Log of x plus 4. Remember to use the negative sign and not the minus sign for this right here. And then we have to do plus 2. So plus 2. So now I graphed it, and then I'm going to hit graph so I can see what's happening here. All right, so now we're going to go through and say we're looking for which is true. Okay, so f of x has a y-intercept at 0, 2. So let me go to my table. So 0, 2, that is not true. Negative f of x has a y-intercept of 0, 2. And so negative f of x just means that we're going to take f of x and we're going to switch it. F of x is our y. So our y here is 2, and it says negative. So that's going to be 0, and we're going to take whatever our y is. So our y here across from 0 is 1.4. So we're going to make that a negative. So negative 1.4. And that is not the same thing as 0, 2. So that is incorrect. Right? Why? Because our actual y-intercept is 1.4 about. So both of those are not true. So the next one says as x approaches infinity. So what does that mean, right? As the numbers get closer to the right, it's asking us what is happening to our y. So our y, is that getting closer to infinity? Here's our y, right? Infinity is up, right? For our y, because our y direction is up or down. So this says as x goes to the right, what happens to the graph? It's actually getting closer and closer to this x-axis. So that is not true. So it looks like the only one that works is option number 4. It says as x approaches -4. So let's go to our table if you want. So as x approaches -4, what is happening to y? Right? So we do get an error right there. So what does that mean? As x approaches -4, so -4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? What is happening to y? Do you see y? Y is actually going up. This part of the graph is missing because the numbers get really, really steep here. So y is going to infinity as x goes to -4. So that is a true statement. It's the only one that's left. Okay. Question number 16, room darkening. We want to see if something affects something else. That can be done with a controlled experiment. We're not going to do a census and count how many people there are. We're not going to do a survey and say, hey, do you have room darkening shades and does it cause you to sleep longer? They're not going to really know. Observational study. Yeah, we're not going to observe. That's kind of creepy. Controlled experiment, right? You can give half people no room darkening shades. You can give the other half room darkening shades. So this is a control group. This is an experimental group. And then you can see if there's an effect. So that is a controlled experiment. Okay, the next one, inverse. Inverse, remember, means that we're going to take x and y and switch it. And that's a horrible set of arrows, but I think you get the point. So here f of x is y, so we get y equals -6x plus 1/2. And so we want to switch them, so x equals -6y plus 1/2. And we want to get the y, well, let's check it. Is that even there? No, none of them say that. So then we've got to get the y by itself. So let's move this 1/2 over by doing -1/2 or -1/2. So we get x minus 1/2 equals negative 6y. To get the y by itself, divide both sides by negative 6. So this gets divided by negative 6, and so does this. Gets divided by negative 6, so that's going to be positive, right? Multiply this by 6, so that's going to become 6 times 2 is going to give us 12. So this cancels out, and I have negative 1 over 6. There's an imaginary 1 over there, plus 1 over 12. This says negative 1 over 6 plus 2, so that's out. Negative 1 over 6 plus 12, that's the one that matches. This is off, and what is that? I don't know. Yeah, that's off. All right, so can be rewritten. As soon as you see this, you can plug this into the store, right? Store number, plug this in, hit enter, write down that number, and then plug each of these in and see which one works. If you want to do it the longer way, we can see that we can take the x squared and divide that by x squared plus 3, and then we can take the 12 and divide that by x squared plus 3. And so, like, what are they doing here? They're looking to see, oh, can we get these to cancel out and get a 1 there? So we could, from this 12, we could take 3 of them and then leave the other 9 here. So you could put 9 like that. And so this right here cancels out to give you a 1 plus 9 over x squared plus 3, which is what this one says. I would definitely do this with the store button. Otherwise, it gets a little crazy and complicated. Which value represents the radian measure? So they're giving you this right here, and they're asking you which one represents the radian measure. So radian, again, is the same thing as 180 divided by pi, is the same thing as 1 radian. So if we look at this right here, this is 1 radian is going to be, if I were to take this radius and stretch it out right here, right, that's going to be like about 1 radian, and this is going to be about 2 radian. So it says which value represents the radian measure of angle theta. So theta is going to be 2 radians long. So the answer choice is 2 for that. Yeah, you don't have to do really much with it. It kind of gives it to you already, right? This distance right here is 2, so that's 2 radians. Okay. Question number 20. The depth of water, So it's asking you which one is false. Keyword here is false. So the easiest way to do this is to go ahead and take a look at your function. So it says the depth, and here is your actual function that they give you. So this one here is the midline. This is where it's cutting the graph in half. This 5 right here is the amplitude, which is the height. Amplitude here is 5. This is the midline where it cuts the graph in half. So sine is going to look something like this. So it's saying that the midline right here is going to be 7. And then the height here is 5. That distance is 5, which is the same thing as this one right here. And then there's a shift. There's this friend here is a horizontal shift of 5 units to the right. Okay, so let's look and see which of these is true. It says, well, which of these is true, so we know which one is false. So it says a low tide occurred at 2 a.m. So to make this a little bit easier for you, instead of just graphing it on my paper, I went ahead and graphed it on my calculator. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my graph. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is make sure that my mode is in radians. So it is in radians, so I'm good. But the second thing I need to make sure that I do is so that I can see the whole graph. So I can see that there's some missing up here. So going back to what we talked about, this is 7 and this is 5 above. So 5 plus 7 is 12. So I need to go as high as 12. So let's go ahead and change my window. Let's go to my Y max. My Y max whenever it feels like it. And let's change this to like 15, just so I can see the whole graph. And now when you graph it, you should be able to like answer these questions. So it's saying which of these is false. So a low tide occurred at 2 a.m. And so if I look, here's 1 a.m., here's 2 a.m., and there is a low tide here. So that is definitely true. The maximum depth of the water was 12 feet. And so if I take a look at that, we kind of already talked about that, right? So if I look at my graph, so the midline is 7, 7 plus 5 is 12. So the maximum depth of the water is 12 is a true statement. And again, if you're not really sure about that, if you hit second and you go to the table, look, you can see that 12 is the maximum depth. So that is true. The water depth at 9 a.m. was approximately 11 feet. Let's look at that, right? This is at 6 a.m. So let's keep going down and let's see what it has at 9 a.m. At 9 a.m. it's 11.33. Is that about 11? Yeah, that's about 11. So that works. That is also true. The last one says the difference in water depth between high tide and low tide is 14 feet. So high tide, again, we talked about this, 7 plus 5 is 12. That's high tide. Low tide is going to be, this is 5 below, so 7 minus 5 is 2. And so if I do the difference, right, difference means I'm subtracting those two numbers, so 12 minus 2 is equal to 10, and that is not the same thing as 14 feet. So that is the one that is false, okay? All right, next one. So we have a function. This looks like a recursive, right? Again, this right here stands for previous. So you're going to take the previous term. They want us to find A3. So they A1, A2, and A3. A1 is already given to us. It's 8. This is for A2, and this is for A3. So how do we find A2, right? A2 says we're going to take the previous term, which is 8, right? So this right here is going to be 8. And then we're going to do a plus sign. So plus sign log of n. So what is our n here? N is 2. So it's going to be 2 plus 1. And then here we're going to do n, which again is 2. We're going to do minus 1. So this becomes a straight calculator question. So this 2 plus 1 is going to be 8 log 3, and then 2 minus 1 is going to be 1. And so when I plug this into my calculator, 8 log base 3. So let me just go ahead and do that for us, just to make sure that we're good. So I'm going to hit, let's hit 8. And then I'm going to do log, and this one has a base, so I can't just use this log function. I have to hit math, go down to the bottom, go to log base, enter, and then let's put 3 here, let's put a 1 here, let's put enter, and I get 0. So this number right here is going to be, what I didn't do is put the plus sign, and you just heard my dog, she was freaking out. But I didn't put the plus sign, and then when I put the plus sign now, I get 8 as my answer. So A2 is going to be 8. And then over here for the next one, I'm going to do, to get n is now 3. So I'm going to do 8, right? And then that's the previous term, plus log. Now my new n is 3. So I'm going to put 3 plus 1. And then this is going to be 3 minus 1. So I could put that into the calculator. If you don't want to do any of the math in your head, you could just type all of that into the calculator. So 8, don't forget the plus sign, and then log is math, go down to log base, enter, and then we're going to do 3 plus 1, which is 4. You could write 3 plus 1 there, and then here this is going to be 3 minus 1, hit enter, and that's going to give you 8.5. So this last one is 8.5. And so what is A3? A3 is 8.5. So that's the correct answer. Okay, good. We're almost done with the multiple choice. Whoo, 22. So which function has a maximum y value of 4 and a midline of y equals 1? All right, so this one has a maximum value of 4. Okay, that is true. And a midline of y equals 1. So because this continues down forever, this does not have any midline. So there's no midline there. Okay. For this one, same thing. Since this continues forever, there is no midline, right? Because if it goes on forever, how can you cut it in half? So that is also not true. These two are just ones that you can plug into the calculator. So plug this into the calculator. Don't forget, as you're plugging this into the calculator, that you, after the x, you close the parentheses, and then you're just going to go ahead and hit graph, and you can go ahead and see that the maximum here is going to be at 4, and the minimum, right, that's, so that one works. And then is there a midline of 1, right? If I take this and cut this in half, looks like the midline is 1. Yeah, it's gonna, that makes sense. Let's just make sure. Yeah, the midline there is 1. That's also here. That says that there's a midline of 1. So this is correct. And then if I plug in the last one, which is just to make sure that we're good. So if I hit, let's delete that. Let's put the 4 here, and instead of close, let's put sign. Everything else is the same. And if I graph it, does this have a midline of 1? Yes, it does. And what is our highest value? Our highest value here is, it actually goes up to 5. Let's go ahead and hit second graph, and let's check, right? You see how this is 4.95? That means that the highest value is about 5. So this does not have a max of 4. They want us to have which one has a maximum value, y value of 4. This one has a maximum y value of 5. So that is not true. All right, 23. Equivalent to, right? As soon as it says equivalent, you could y1 this, y2, and then see which one matches for that. Or you could sit there and you could do box method here. We have done a problem like this in class. Let's just go ahead and do this the longer way, just to make sure. X, and this is y I. And over here we have x squared. This is negative xyi. And this is negative y squared. So x squared times x is going to be x to the third. This is going to be a negative x squared yi. This is going to be negative xy squared. Okay. And then we're going to have, this is going to be x squared yi. These are going to cancel each other out. This is going to be y, the negative xy squared I squared. Interesting. Okay, and this last one is going to be negative y to the third I. All right, so what happens here, right? When it's I squared is the same thing as negative 1. So this becomes negative. Negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive, so this becomes positive xy squared. So this and this cancel out, and so what are you left with? You are left with x to the third minus y to the third I, which is answer choice number 4. Okay. This one, plug this in, and then you see which one matches, and the one that matches, it says approximately, the one that is the closest is going to be choice number 1. Okay. All right, good job. 44 minutes about. That was part 1. Great job. Stay with it. Okay.